Hello, this is a Brave Knight Mercenary spotlight on Larkis. After his rework on March 2022, Larkis was perhaps the character that is most deserving of a rework. The character failed to be good ever, and was only seen in specific niche situations. All that changes from here on out though. Let's go over Larkis' reworked skills. Larkis' first skill is Curse Counter. Before receiving a normal attack, Larkis applies Curse onto his attacker. The Curse debuff is significantly stronger now and can reduce up to 125% of an attacker's stats. At +6 and above, Larkis will also remove any removable stat enhancements on his attacker. Larkis' second skill is the Demon. This is a new skill. Larkis' original main counter skill split into two components, and this is one of them. This is an immunity skill that provides attack interference immunity to Larkis. The skill also boosts Larkis' max HP every turn for 30 turns. When Larkis is attacked, Larkis gets a death guard for that turn. The death guard is applied before receiving a normal attack. Larkis' third skill is Demon Counter. This is a reflective counter skill that has Larkis counter-attacking his opponent. Larkis will deal direct damage back to his attacker based on his attack stat. He will also deal another direct damage counter back to his attacker based on his additional HP stat. Additional HP is any HP that's provided by buffs, soul gears, and runes. Remember that Larkis' second skill provides him with a growing max HP buff. Larkis' awakening skill is Demon's Touch. This is an additional damage skill that occurs after normal attack. Larkis deals direct additional damage based on his attack stat. He also deals another direct damage source based on his additional HP. Larkis is a hybrid defensive warrior that is defined by his ability to deal direct damage on both his attack and his counter. Direct damage is the best damage that a character can deal, and Larkis is capable of inflicting two sources of direct damage that scales with his attack and his HP. Larkis' high base attack allows him to do reasonable damage with his first direct damage source, but the more interesting part is the second source of direct damage that scales with his bonus HP. Larkis will begin to gain max HP every turn for the first 30 turns, which not only makes Larkis a bit tankier, but also allows his counter and his on-hit damage to be better. Dealing two direct damage sources allows Larkis to potentially kill with his normal attack and his first damage source, and pierce through immortality mechanics with the second. On top of all of this, Larkis is always protected by Death Guard when he receives an attack. In order to kill Larkis, a unit needs to deal guard ignoring damage, and they need to do a good amount in case the fight is within the later parts of the round and Larkis has a decent HP build up. Larkis carries no inherent defense or incoming damage reduction, so even with decent HP he's deceptively fragile. Larkis is also prone to any debuffs that aren't attack interferences, and he isn't protected by Death Guard when he attacks, which makes him prone to other units' counters. Larkis' main preferred runes tend to be either flat vitality runes or percentage assault runes. If you plan to buff Larkis, assault will benefit him more, but flat vitality runes may provide more damage on this counter than assault does in situations where you do not buff him. If you have any mixed vitality and assault runes, Larkis could definitely utilize them. I'll go over what Larkis counters. A direct damage counter will beat most units, but Larkis' Death Guard allows him to kill many units with his counter and live to tell the tale. His most notable units that he preys on is Eden, Mercenary, Levia if he is not her main target, and also Lillian and Velford. Even if he dies, he could trade with many other units. Larkis' direct damage on hit is also very strong and can kill many units as well. Most things are weak to direct damage, and it can be assumed that if he doesn't have any unique damage mitigation and it doesn't have more than 10,000 life, Larkis can kill it with his counter. I'll go over some Larkis counters now. Any guard ignoring attack is likely to take out Larkis. Stella buffed units Angelica, Alec, Lumen, Eldora, Dwen, Seto, Larkis, Barbara, Levia, Nartis, Belia Skeletons, and a few more. Do note that this will often result in a trade with Larkis' counter. Larkis is not DOT immune, so if a unit can't break through his guard, they can still leave him with the DOT to kill him off later. Gunther, Slane, Catherine, Rogan, and Kyria can do this. Some units cannot die during their attack and are good candidates to attack Larkis with. Lindcross and Victor have this mechanic. Some units don't directly attack Larkis and can take him out. Cilion, Barbariba, and Asbode are some examples. Larkis does deal a lot of damage as the fight progresses, but his initial scaling on his counters are pretty weak. Demon's counter direct damage that scales with his attack only deals 25% of Larkis' attack stat as direct damage, meaning that high HP units can easily shrug off that portion. With really good runes, max rank boost, and buffs, Larkis' direct damage on his attack will still deal only around 8,000 damage, which threatens many squishier units but definitely won't hurt many tanks. His direct damage on his HP scaling only grows stronger by 375 damage per turn, and even at 30 turns it will deal a total of 11,250 damage. Larkis deals around 20,000 direct damage, but this is peak conditions, and usually it's a little bit less, especially early on in a fight. This allows units with decent HP like Orphina, Zenith, Celia, and Taylor to potentially live against Larkis early on. The more tanky units like Granhilder, Bane, Lettercrat, Calarone, Urabel, and even Baltor and Cowley kinda shrug off his counter. Speaking of some tanky units, some of these tanks have counters which Larkis will kill himself if he runs into them, unless his HP can absorb the hit. Granhilder, Seto, Astrid, and Isaac are some good examples. Vermont is really good at dealing with Larkis as he deals guard ignoring damage and has a very decent HP pool. Vermont's attack also occurs before normal attack, which activates first before Larkis is able to even activate his death guard. When 2 units have skills to activate before normal attack, the attacker gets priority. This allows Jin and Rydell to also kill Larkis assuming they could do enough damage. Speaking of Jin, he could also just reflect Larkis' damage back at himself. So some synergies with Larkis. Larkis has a glaring open spot with his defense and incoming damage reduction that can be compensated by Rafithia and Isabel. Larkis also does appreciate other means of damage mitigation, such as Vanaka or Veronia. Larkis is naturally a great unit to run in Delta Hidne forms and Stella forms due to being a warrior. Stella is also nice in helping him get more HP and dealing more damage while providing some defense. Otherwise, Larkis is a relatively versatile character. Okay, so for my opinion. Oh my gosh, they actually have done it. Larkis finally doesn't suck. Larkis has a very infamous reputation for being the most tragic 5-star ever released in the post-companion updates. He was pretty bad on release, and only 2 weeks after his release he was made worse with the 6 Devils companion update. Larkis was doomed. Not even Delta Hidne or Vanaka did much to help him, that's just how jank he was. But now the boy has been blessed with a rework, and it's pretty damn good. I was expecting direct damage to be put on either his counter or his attack, but he ended up getting it on both, and that's kind of nutty. Now Larkis isn't impervious obviously, but now he neatly fits into the triangle of damage types that the devs have spent so long trying to set up, with the triangle being guard, defense, and barriers. Larkis' defensive specialty lies within the guards, and he will beat out most things that don't ignore guards, or at least he will live. The incrementing HP boost is also nice and can add to some interesting durability to Larkis, although he lacks any defense or incoming damage reduction to utilize it well. Nothing a few supports can't fix though. Curse counter is also deceptively useful given that a lot of legend supports have removable buffs. What's most important for Larkis is that he has a purpose now and he's a really solid character. Even if his counter sometimes is unreliable for damage, his on-hit direct damage is still incredibly nice, and the fact that he hits 2 tiles now is a major jump. While Larkis still dies to many things, he's very good at trading deaths in the situation that he does die. Similar to Seto, Larkis becomes a landmine where he's bound to always get value. Larkis is used in arena formats and many PvE stages. Larkis is still one of the best units to blaze through campaign with. He could solo nearly every campaign level in the first story, and the mileage that you get from him is insane for PvE alone. So the question begs, should you invest in Larkis? And my answer is yes. Larkis is good for the same reasons that Seto is good. In fact, it's not far off to say that Larkis is a non-legend version of Seto, although they do definitely behave differently in many regards. Larkis is comparable to Seto due to the direct damage counter and the direct damage attack that they both share. They also both strike 2 tiles, although Larkis hits front while Seto hits skip. Both units also utilize guards to stay alive, but that's where the similarities end. Larkis holds his own very well and is finally a character worth building. When it comes to skill levels, he has a pretty steady growth, but unfortunately his first 6 levels are dedicated to improving his curse counter, which isn't really what makes Larkis strong. If you get past the initial 6 levels, he begins to improve either his counter, max HP growth, or on-hit damage, and all 3 are really beneficial. Larkis is probably one of the most steady unit builds I've seen in a while, where every skill level is good, but there's no major spikes which I feel like he needs to be at to actually function. Overall, I'm happy for the boy. He held on tight and finally has his turn to shine. Same applies for the bread girl. It kind of throws a new meaning to the term, let's go get that bread. These kids are definitely ready to make money now. Wait, no, that phrase may imply unethical child labor practices. Basically, what I mean to say is that these kids deserve to be rich now. That's what I really mean. Thanks for watching my Larkis Mercenary Spotlight. Stay tuned for more.